Joining us now is another hero who is friends with James O'Keefe, who I know has strong opinions about this. Tom Fitton is with us from Judicial Watch. Tom, welcome to the program.
Hey, Charlie, good to be with you. Thanks for having me again.
Always welcome on the program. You're one of the few fighters, just like James O'Keefe is. Tom, how should we approach this James O'Keefe saga, which is increasingly a circus on behalf of Project Veritas's board?
Well, the board hasn't asked me for advice, nor has James, so I'm hesitant to freely give it. I'm hoping they can resolve it. I haven't seen anything that the board has released to suggest the kind of extraordinary action that they took was warranted, especially given the risks to the company. So if I were them, I'd try to walk it back as quickly as I can and resolve the issues they have with James so they can get back to work.
How important is James O'Keefe to the movement?
Well, I think he has this entrepreneurial spirit and an approach that it's hard to clone. And so he has a unique approach that was pursued through Project Veritas. And, I think he'll land on his feet no matter what happens. But there are these leaders in our movement and in the nation that we shouldn't cast aside easily, and I don't think that's going to happen with James.
I sure hope not. He's incredibly important. I want to talk about the story here. Judicial Watch: Los Angeles County confirms removal of 1.2 million ineligible voters. This is all because of Judicial Watch. Tell us about it.
Yeah, we sued in federal court. It's a few years ago now to get LA County and generally California to get back on track in terms of ensuring that they're taking reasonable steps to clean up the voter rolls, which is required under federal law, the National Voter Registration Act. And it looked like to us, and I think they admitted to this, that they hadn't cleaned their rolls in 20 years under some sort of consent decree they had with back to the Clinton administration. So long story short is they settled with us, and it was a remarkable settlement. To their credit, they committed to, over time, cleaning up the rolls specifically in Los Angeles County. And they finally reported back to us the results of that work that took years. I think it should have been done more quickly, but, it was a settlement, so that's life. And they confirmed 1.2 million names were removed. Half of those names, it looks like, Charlie, had been on the rolls and hadn't done anything, meaning been inactive for at least 10 years. So this is a remarkable development for cleaner elections in California, because it doesn't mean that, if there's an inactive voter sitting on the rolls, it doesn't mean they're voting illegally. Obviously, if they vote, they become active. But it's kind of it's a pool of names from which fraudsters can draw. So if someone moves away, then that's a name potentially that can be easily taken up and then voted on. And so that's why you have these rules requiring them to take reasonable steps to clean up the rolls. So we've got 1.2 million taken off the rolls in California. This happened, looks like, over the last year. So they waited to the last minute in terms of the settlement. And then, separately, we had a lawsuit against New York City that resulted in a settlement that happened after they removed 440,000 names from the rolls. And just before that, North Carolina, we stopped our lawsuit after they removed, after we sued, 430,000 names, I think. So we're just talking 2 million names in the last year have been cleaned up as a result of litigation by one group, Judicial Watch. By the way, litigation that in the ordinary course should have been and still should be pursued by an honest Justice Department, but they don't care. They want the rolls to be dirty, in my view, the leftists there, so their political allies can steal elections if necessary. And that's not something that we countenance.
So is there any evidence that these names that will now be removed from the voter rolls received mail-in ballots?
It's hard to tell. Potentially, yes. If they're inactive, they shouldn't have received ballots, but they're all able to vote. What's interesting is in 2020, going back, Governor Newsom wanted to send them all ballots. and we sued to stop it and won. So if they had their druthers, they would be getting ballots, but they're all despite being inactive, they can all vote. They just show up and vote or obtain a mail-in ballot.
Or somebody in their name, right? I mean, that's
right.
that's
or they can just get their, someone can just send a name, send a request in their name.
So
that's the risk that's now alleviated and mitigated as a result of their names being removed.
So this is just one of several areas across the country where this is a major concern. How many, if you were to speculate, millions of ineligible voters are still on voter rolls? Let's just say in the key states, Arizona, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin.
Well, we have litigation ongoing in Pennsylvania.
Good.
We have litigation ongoing in Colorado. It continues to be an issue. It's millions. I'd be hesitant to take a wild guess because I don't want the fact checkers to come down on me like a ton of bricks.
No, but it's significant. No, I'm not trying to. I'm just asking for a speculative.
It's a significant number. In New York, for instance, they didn't remove people from the rolls for 5-6 years.
Mm-hmm.
But thanks to our work, states are being more careful, and I think the story here is that Judicial Watch settled with California and Los Angeles County and New York City. It's not exactly the types of jurisdictions that one would think that Judicial Watch would be able to easily settle with on this sensitive topic. But they know what the law is, and the Supreme Court has made it clear that rolls are to be cleaned up pursuant to the law. So we're on the side of light here, but there's still a lot of work to be done. As I've
it's incredibly important work.
Colorado and Pennsylvania, and we'll see what else is going on, because it's a yearly analysis that we undertake. So the numbers for registrations and inactives will be coming around soon from the last election cycle, and we'll see how things are then.
Tom, we have an email here. Charlie loved Judicial Watch and their work. Please ask Tom if there's any follow-up as to the purge voter rolls. How do we know if it's actually been done? Sandra from Fair Oaks, California. Tom, what's your response?
Well, it was sent to us on official documentation. The numbers are pretty easy to verify. We trust they were done, and it's an astonishing amount of names that were deleted over the last year or removed, as I say, should have probably been done a decade or more ago. So it's pursuant to a court process and a federal court settlement. We don't trust. We do verify as best as we're able to under the law.
I want to talk about another story here. Judicial Watch sues the Department of Homeland Security for records on election censorship. Tell us about it.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of, I think, a few lawsuits that have been spawned as a result of the Twitter files release. And I think the specific one you're referencing, it looks like these NGOs, these non-governmental organizations and government entities were essentially engaging in censorship activities targeting countless Americans on what is the equivalent of a Slack channel. I don't use Slack, but sort of a casual approach to censorship, and we're asking for the documents. And recall, we don't sue unless they tell us they don't comply with the law. So the Department of Homeland Security, rather than disclose information about their censorship activities, is hiding these records in violation of the FOIA law. And I'm sorry, but when you break the law, especially on sensitive topics like this, in terms of secrecy, it suggests to me, and I think to most fair-minded people, that there's something they don't want us to see.
Yeah, and I just want to remind our audience, because this was a story we covered rather extensively a couple months ago. The government, thanks to the United States Constitution, the Founding Fathers put rules for what the government cannot do. The government knows this. They don't always follow those rules, but to get creative, they outsourced their censorship to other companies because private companies are not bound by the Bill of Rights. They can basically do whatever they want. And so, but is that still the case, Tom? I'm just curious. There has to be some constitutional precedent, maybe not, of a government agency outsourcing the behavior that they themselves could not do. The equivalent would be asking telecom companies after 9/11 to listen in on Muslims' phone calls, right? Just something that would have gotten the liberal media upset. Is there any precedent for this?
Well, you're highlighting the illegality of it and the unconstitutional nature of it. The government can't do, through a cutout, something that they're prohibited under law from doing directly. And we know in California, for instance, speaking of which, the Secretary of State's office in 2020 was, as now has been widely disclosed, but we had uncovered it first, was working through these big tech companies to take down material they didn't like related to election controversies. And one of those, DC Drano, the internet influencer,
he's great.
He had tweets taken down, and Judicial Watch found in these documents, we were a victim too. They took down a video of mine for Judicial Watch talking about the concerns I had about mail-in voting and the dirty voting rolls in California and such. And YouTube took it down. So we sued under the Constitution, civil rights lawsuit, this California Secretary of State for that very issue, that they were violating our civil rights by getting YouTube to take this video down of ours.
Yeah, and I don't know. Well, here's what I do know. I do know that I was on a list by the Department of Homeland Security, and I do know that I was placed on a blacklist by Twitter. I don't know if those two things are connected. So I'm curious, and Tom, thank you for fighting the fight for me, because I was explicitly put on a do not amplify list by Twitter, and I do know the Department of Homeland Security had me on a very long report, and so reasonable minds can say, hey, 1 + 2 should equal 3, right? And so, Tom, any closing thoughts on this?
Well, you have potential civil rights claims. I'm not a lawyer, but certainly any lawyer would look at that and wonder if there was a connection and whether it's worth pursuing via litigation. In the least, Congress has got to step in, because the Biden administration hasn't stopped doing anything that we're concerned about here. Maybe Twitter's ratcheted things back, but it hasn't stopped over at Facebook and Google. They embrace this censorship. They embrace this role. They think they're able to do what we all object to. So Congress has got to step in and target those who committed these illicit acts and be explicit as to prohibiting it from happening anymore.
Tom, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Please support Judicial Watch. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Charlie.